Going on to Yajuj and Majuj, meaning the timeline up to the time of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, we know that when Al-Imam al-Mahdi will conquer Constantinople and the city of Rome, Ad-Dajjal shall appear. Where shall he appear from? From the east. From the east. And then he will appear in various cities in the east. So what is mentioned in the previous seminar, we covered the journey of Ad-Dajjal across the cities. So he shall appear in places like Asfahan. Then from Asfahan, take a journey with the 70,000 Jews that shall follow him shall be from Asfahan wearing the shawls. Then the journey will go through Basra and Kufa and all these different cities until he appears in Sham. When he appears in Sham, that is when his global tour starts. Meaning like Donald Trump takes his aeroplane around the world, presidential aeroplane, Air Force One, Ad-Dajjal, who will now be the new proclaimed president of the world, he shall defeat the Muslims in what Al-Imam al-Mahdi had restored. And this is when Al-Imam al-Mahdi radiallahu anh and the Muslims shall retreat. But what shall occur prior to that is years of famine also. Remember 3 years of famine, where 1/3 of the rain will be withheld, then 2/3, and then the entire world's rain shall be stopped for 3 years. So there will be poverty apart from the regions where Muslims were ruling, where Al-Imam al-Mahdi was ruling, there shall be global poverty. But then when Ad-Dajjal reconquers those regions for the non-Muslims, for the Jews specifically, poverty shall increase in those regions, death shall increase, killing shall increase. And then his claim to being God, he shall make his claim in every city. But the Muslims are advised not to go to him. If he enters your city, do not go to him, stay in your homes or run to the mountains. Of course, if people have smartphones at that time, they will attempt to watch him on the smartphone. Meaning the tribulation will be immense, but it will be, one point to note, it will be a post-apocalyptic world. Why will it be a post-apocalyptic world? This is why I believe at that time technology will not be rife. Why? Because once the malhama has occurred, al-malhamatul kubra, the Muslim world will also be affected. So remember, the malhama will be so immense. You will have 7 years of prosperity, but the malhama will be so immense between Al-Imam al-Mahdi and the forces, the European forces, that thousands will die. 1/3 of the army of Al-Imam al-Mahdi will run away. 1/3 will be martyred, and 1/3 will receive victory. But the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what shall they be happy regard, meaning the victory shall not give them any happiness, because many of them would have died. And the war booty that they have gained, even if it is distributed, many of them have died. So they will leave widows. And this is the meaning of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, that one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that there will be 50 women to 1 man. Now some people read this hadith with the flawed methodology, and they try applying the hadith today. So they make theories up. One theory was the mobile phone, it does away with one of the chromosomes. You have the X chromosome and the Y chromosome, and therefore the men will give birth to more girls than boys. And this is the meaning of the hadith. I mean, this is takalluf in interpreting the hadith. The correct meaning of the hadith is, after al-malhamatul kubra, so many deaths would have occurred in that region that each male would have 50 women to look after. Qayyimun wahidun, meaning one caretaker for 50 women, daughters, nieces, different women related to that one individual. It's an occurrence that shall happen then in that specific region. That sign has not occurred. It will occur after Al-Malhamatul Kubra. This is why it's important knowing the timeline. So when Ad-Dajjal, the individual, appears, we know regarding the descent of Isa alayhi salam. And remember, at that time, the people with Al-Imam al-Mahdi radiyallahu anhu will only number a few hundred. Will only number a few hundred, meaning it's very unlikely we will be alive to see that time. Very unlikely. We have to understand the timeline we are living in. We are living in the pre-World War III time. If we survive World War III, then very few people will survive the time of the Sufyani. Not only because of the wars, but because of our lifespans, meaning it could be decades away. But what we do know is that currently we are in al-fitnatul umya. So after all these occurrences and Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam descends, where on the eastern minaret in Damascus, when he descends at the eastern minaret in Damascus, which Mirza Ghulam Qadiani again distorted the hadith, meaning this is an old trick, saying he had a minaret constructed in India in Qadian, and he said, look, it's east of Damascus. The minaret is east of Damascus because if you draw a line from Damascus to India, it's east. But of course the hadith means that there will be a white minaret in Damascus at which Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam will descend. Some have said it's the minaret in the Grand Umayyad Masjid, which is closed off today. It's the same minaret that Al-Imam al-Ghazali wrote portions of his Ihya. Others in Damascus, scholars in Damascus, have said it's the minaret in Bab Tuma. Bab Tuma is a Christian district. There is a white minaret constructed by the Christians with a cross, a white cross. So it makes sense that Isa alayhi salam will descend there to guide the Christians and then destroy the cross. The Christians will follow him. What is also mentioned is that the Jews in Damascus at that time will also accept Islam at the hands of Isa alayhi salam. Likewise, Al-Imam al-Mahdi radiyallahu anh will have converted many Jews to Islam. This is something not mentioned by people, that many of the Jews, of course this could be referring to the Sephardic Jews, the real Jewish people, not the Khaza Jews like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's Polish, meaning he's Khaza. These are Khaza Jews from Central Asia, from the Caucasus, and they migrated to Europe. They are not Semitic people. Benjamin Netanyahu is not a Semitic individual, but they employ the term anti-Semitism, but many of them are not Semitic. Nevertheless, after all these events shall transpire and Isa alayhi salam will chase Ad-Dajjal up to the gate of Lud and kill Ad-Dajjal, the individual, Dajjal the individual at Lud. To Lud today there is an actual gate to the city of Lud. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Lud was a small village. There was no gate, but now there is a gate. And the Israelis have an airport near Lud. But of course, I believe Al-Imam al-Mahdi would have destroyed that airport, or Ad-Dajjal will re-establish another airport once he takes over that region. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. These are ghaybiyat that will only become apparent when they occur. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inform Isa alayhi salam that a group of people known as Yajuj and Majuj have appeared. And this is the discussion now regarding Yajuj and Majuj. Firstly, there is a famous debate as to whether Western civilization is Yajuj and Majuj. I do not ascribe to this for various reasons. One is that Yajuj and Majuj is described as an eastern people that no one can defeat. Isa alayhi salam is told to go and take protection in the mountain of Tur. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down a bacteria or a worm and they are killed. But Western civilization falls under the period of Tada'i. Do you remember the period of Tada'i? Which was the period of Tada'i when the nations shall converge on the Muslims like people who eat akala, converge on a platter. When they converge on a platter, the nations are like this. So the nations, the Western nations, whether they are the northern barbarians or whether it's the Khaza Jews or whether it's anyone else, they are all a part of the nations of the world. So this becomes difficult for people to comprehend because they say Yajuj and Majuj exceed humanity in number. Where and how can a group so huge be hidden from our eyesight today when we live in the age of Google Maps, when we live in the age of satellites, when you can check from space as to the location of Yajuj and Majuj. So this is a small presentation with that regard. With the first thing, let's identify Yajuj and Majuj. Firstly, they are from the offspring of Adam alayhi salam. They are human beings. And they are from the offspring of Yafith bin Nuh. Yafith bin Nuh. Meaning, Nuh alayhi salam had a child known as Yafith. And from him, numerous nations, he sired numerous sons who sired numerous nations. عن سمرة بن جندب رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. This hadith is narrated by Imam Ahmad and Imam al-Hakim. It's an authentic hadith. ولد نوح ثلاثة. The children of Noah had three: Sam, Ham and Yafith. So he had three children from whom numerous nations came about. In another hadith from both Samura radiallahu anh and Imran radiallahu anh, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَلَدُ نُوحٍ ثَلَاثَةٌ. The offspring of Noah had three. فَسَام أَبُو الْعَرَبِ. Sam is the father of the Arabs. وَحَام أَبُو الْحَبَشَةِ. Ham is the father of Habasha, African people. وَيَافِثْ أَبُو الرُّوم. Yafith is the father of Ar-Rum. This doesn't negate the other nations. One of them can give birth to more than one nation. These are just some of the nations being specified. Then Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, one of the most reliable scholars of Islam, he states that according to the majority of the ulama, that the Yajuj and Majuj tribes are offspring of Yafith. Now, Yafith, the races that descend from Yafith are races like the Turkic people and the Chinese people and all the races of the East, meaning even Indians. So the Indian subcontinent, the entire region, the Chinese, the Indonesians, Malaysians, the Turks, and Yajuj and Majuj. All of them are offspring of Yafith. This is with regard to Yajuj and Majuj as human beings, because some people, they misunderstand the narrations and they think that Yajuj and Majuj are jinn or monsters. Then we study some of the hadith. Now, in total, if you look for the hadith on Yajuj and Majuj, you will find around 40 to 50 hadith, if not more, but they revolve around one theme. One of those hadith is regarding the Day of Judgment, meaning Al-Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call out to Adam alayhi salam, Ya Adam, qum fab'ath ba'th an-nar. Take out the denizens of hell. And he will comply and ask, who are the people to go to hell? وَمَا بَعْثُ النَّارِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall say that from every 1,999. From every 1,999. And then the child's hair shall go grey, and if there was a woman pregnant, she would miscarriage. And people will be intoxicated, but they are not, lie as if they are sukara, as if they are drunk, but they will not be drunk, meaning a description of the Day of Judgment from Al-Quranul Kareem. So, at this point, the companions became worried. How from every 1,999 will go to hell? The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Yajuj and Majuj make up the 999. Wa minkum wahid, and from you is one. This is one hadith. This is the hadith that makes it difficult for some people to comprehend. That the number of Yajuj and Majuj, if it is so huge and large, where are they today? They must be released. Meaning, the way they interpret it is you have one of two options. Either Yajuj and Majuj are hidden away and we cannot comprehend how such a huge group is hidden away. The second scenario is that they were released in previous times and they make up some of the nations of the world today. Abdul Rahman al-Sa'di, who is the teacher of Salih al-Uthaymeen, he ascribed to the theory that all the nations of the world today are Yajuj and Majuj except the Arabs and the Muslims. He was silenced by the Saudi authorities regarding this, by the king. But he wrote a book which was published posthumously on that subject. So, likewise, another hadith with a similar meaning, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall mention, take out, place the ba'thun nar, those who will be dispatched to hell. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be asked, who are the ba'thun nar, those who will be dispatched to hell, the companions are told, Abshiru, take glad tidings, فَإِنَّ فِي يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ لَكُمْ فِدَاء, that you have a fida in Yajuj and Majuj. Fida meaning, instead of you being sent, Yajuj and Majuj will be sent. فَإِنَّ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلًا وَمِنْ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ أَلْفٍ. From you 1 man, and from them 1,000. So this again becomes difficult for people to comprehend. I will respond to how we answer the objections shortly. A third hadith, which is narrated by Imam al-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala, from Sayyiduna Imran bin Hussein radiyallahu anhu, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, فَوَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ, by the one who grasps my soul, إِنَّكُمْ لَمَعَ خَلِيقَتَيْن, you are with two creations. مَا كَانَتَا فِي شَيْءٍ, they are not found in anything, إِلَّا كَثَرَتَاهُ, except they exceeded. يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ. وَمَنْ مَاتَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمْ وَمِنْ بَنِي إِبْلِيسِ, and whoever dies from the offspring of Adam alayhi salam, وَمِنْ بَنِي إِبْلِيسِ, and the offspring of Shaitan, Iblis, a jinn. This hadith clarifies the previous hadith. Likewise, another hadith which may confuse people is Inna Yajuj wa Majuj min waladi Adam, that Yajuj and Majuj are from the offspring of Adam alayhi salam. Wa innahum law ursilu ila nasi la afsadu alayhim ma'ayishahum, if they are dispatched on people, they will destroy their livelihood. وَلَنْ يَمُوتَ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدٌ, none of them die except إِلَّا تَرَكَ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِهِ أَلْفًا فَسَاعِدًا, none of them die except that they leave 1,000 offspring. So This now is the objection, that if they are so huge, where are they? They must be released. So some people have ascribed to a theory that the Darial Gorge in Georgia or in the Caucasus, a metal wall constructed by one of the Persian kings, you read up on it, it was there, but then it was destroyed. When was it destroyed? They say during the time when the Khazar Jews, they weren't Jews at the time, the Turkic tribe known as the Khazar, they appeared. So when they appeared, the wall disappeared and they formed an empire in that region, near the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. That region, they formed an empire in the 600s. Around the time when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a dream and awoke and said, Yajuj and Majuj have made a hole in the wall. So they say, look, this was the first hole. The Yajuj and Majuj escaped and they destroyed the wall, because in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one companion came and he said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I saw the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. It's made from, its color is like stripes. There are stripes of red and black. So the wall existed in the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's in Bukhari. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a dream that Yajuj, and the dreams of prophets are true, that Yajuj and Majuj have made a hole in the wall. A hole in the wall, meaning and this alluded to their escape. So when the caliphs conquered different regions, they had to fight the Khazar Jews, who were a strong opponent, and therefore these Khazar Jews, they are Yajuj and Majuj because the Khulafa could not defeat them. This is the theory. Then when the Khazar Jews disappeared and were finally defeated, they dispersed to Europe, and their families settled in Europe, in Poland and other places. And from them, the modern day banking families like the Rothschilds and the others, they all descend from these Khazar Jews, which is factual. They do descend from the Khazar Jews. But the point of disagreement is, these Khazar Jews, are they Yajuj and Majuj? So to answer that, they say, if you believe Yajuj and Majuj are still behind a barrier, you must answer these objections, that their numbers exceed everyone. But the answer is simple to that, that if they exceed the number of the companions and the number of the world, then at the time of their release, in that time, they should have exceeded the world's population, which they didn't. Meaning the Khazar Jews did not exceed the number of the world's population. So you are misunderstanding the hadith. If you place all the hadith together, you will understand that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, two things you will understand. One is that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he says they exceed your number, in one narration he only mentions Yajuj and Majuj, but in the other narration he mentions the rest of the offspring of Adam alayhi salam and the offspring of Iblis. So if you add the disbelievers from humankind, the disbelievers of jinn kind, of Iblis, the disbelievers of Yajuj and Majuj, they together make up 999 out of every 1,000. Number one. Number two, if you read the hadith correctly, you will realize that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says minkum, meaning from amongst you. This means the companions or the Arabs. That if you add the population of the Arabs, the disbelievers will exceed the Arabs by 999 out of every 1,000 on the Day of Judgment. Or the Yajuj and Majuj in comparison to you companions are 999 out of every 1,000. This is what I have understood from the hadith. Even though some scholars do ascribe to the opinion that they exceed humanity, but this is not an issue of ijma', consensus. So therefore, this is the correct interpretation of the hadith. Then the objection remains if they do not exceed all of humanity, when they appear in the time of Isa alayhi salam, why is he unable to defeat them? The response is, if you read the hadith correctly, all of the hadith, you will realize that Isa alayhi salam and his supporters in the time only number a few hundred. There is a clear hadith on this, numerous hadith. Because of the wars, the malhama, and then the rule of Ad-Dajjal, many of the believers would have died. Many of the people of the earth would have died because of the famines, the poverty, meaning there will be so much poverty that Ad-Dajjal will go to a group of people and say, you know, the famous narrations like An-Nawas bin Sam'an and others narrate that he will take advantage of people's poverty, giving them cows, filling the udders of the cows with milk, reviving dead camels, meaning poverty. Because of this, people will die, so the population will be less. So at that time, the number of Yajuj and Majuj will exceed the Muslims excessively at that particular time. And when they reach Lake Tiberias, so an additional objection, that when Yajuj and Majuj reach Lake Tiberias, which is the Sea of Galilee, the sea upon which Isa alayhi salam walked, the water will finish. Today the state of Israel is drinking the sea, and the sea has gone beyond the stage of recovery. So they are saying the Khaza Jews, Benjamin Netanyahu and all these people, they are drinking the water from Lake Tiberias. This means they are Yajuj and Majuj, or the first dispatching of Yajuj and Majuj. The response to that is that Yajuj and Majuj will drink the remaining water, whatever will remain up to that point. The water will not finish now. It will not finish now. It will finish at the time of Yajuj and Majuj. How do we explain the Zionist hegemony or Zionist globalist agenda today without reference to Yajuj and Majuj? Do we need to reference it to Yajuj and Majuj? The answer is no. If you study the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Isra and Surah Bani Israel and Surah Al-Hashr and verses of Surah Al-Baqarah and verses from Surah Ali Imran, you will realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already mentioned the role of Bani Israel in the end of times, without reference to Yajuj and Majuj. But then two additional objections remain. One is, where is the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj? And the second is in relation to the verse of Al-Quran Al-Kareem in Surah Al-Anbiya, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that any town that is destroyed, haramun, it is prohibited upon the people of that town to return. It is prohibited on the people of that town to return until what? حتى إذا فتحت يأجوج ومأجوج. That until Yajuj and Majuj have been opened, meaning their barrier has been opened. So how the theory goes is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the people of a town, which is the Jews, and the town is Jerusalem. And when the people were banished from Jerusalem, they can never come back to the town until Yajuj and Majuj are released. This is the theory. And the Jews have never been able to conquer, to invade Jerusalem until our present history. That means that the Jews have returned back to Jerusalem, and it means that Yajuj and Majuj have been released. Who are Yajuj and Majuj? They are contained within the British Empire, within the American Empire, within the various empires, or within Western colonialism. I mean, Yajuj and Majuj are within them. It doesn't mean that the nations are Yajuj and Majuj. It refers to the Khaza Jews and others who are located within Western civilization who are Yajuj and Majuj. But as I mentioned earlier, that if you followed the lecture Tada'i, the Marhalatu Tada'i, that the the nations are already mentioned in the hadith. Who are the The Western nations specifically that colonized the Muslim world. There is no mention of Yajuj and Majuj. Likewise, the relationship between the Jews and the other nations is mentioned in other verses of the Quran, in Surah Ali Imran and other verses of the Quran. There is no mention of Yajuj and Majuj. But the description of Yajuj and Majuj is that they are mufsiduna fil ard. They should cause corruption on the earth. So what these people say is that this corruption that we observe in the world today is the corruption of Yajuj and Majuj. When in reality that corruption is a different type that will occur once the barrier has been opened in the time of Isa alayhi salam. The corruption that we observe today has its roots in other things, in the multiple groups that conspired to dismantle the Khilafah. If you read up on those groups, you will know where the roots of the current corruption is. But nevertheless, they say, okay, the reverse of the Quran says that any town, the town is specifically Jerusalem. Where is this verse? You can check it in Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 96 and 97. Verses 96 and 97. The response is very simple. And grammatically as well, their claim makes no sense in terms of Arabic grammar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Surah Al-Anbiya is, if you check the theme of Surah Al-Anbiya, it mentions the previous prophets and destroyed nations. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the towns that are destroyed, like in verse number 93, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning those towns that disobeyed the messengers. They were destroyed. Any one of those towns that was destroyed, it is not permitted for them to return on the Day of Judgment. Until what? Until the signs of the Day of Judgment occur, one of which is the opening of the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. That is the correct interpretation of the verse. Otherwise, Qarya, the word Qarya means a town, is without al-ta'rif, without al. It's not al-Qarya, it's Qarya, it means any town. Throughout Al-Quran Al-Kareem, it refers to towns in general, but the person says in response, look at the story of Uzair alayhi salam in Surah Al-Baqarah, أو كالذي مر على قرية, or like the one who passed by a town. They say, look, it's specific. What town was this? This was Jerusalem. Therefore, قرية is specific in that verse. It's also specific in this verse. This is the response. But the response to that is, there is no agreement that was Jerusalem. Read the story of Uzair alayhi salam. He's buried far from Jerusalem. He's not buried in Jerusalem. He passed by another town. The commentators mention that because Jerusalem is not specified, it may refer to any town. But they say no, it refers to Jerusalem, and the return means the return of the Jewish people. So this dispute remains. Meaning, they say that the town was destroyed, meaning it was destroyed numerous times. Therefore, the Jews can never be returned to Jerusalem once they were expelled, unless the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj is open. And the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj was in the Darial Gorge and is not currently there in Georgia, and therefore the Yajuj and Majuj have been released. The other opinion is Yajuj and Majuj are still contained. And I've answered the objection that how can they be contained if they exceed humanity? I've answered that objection. So, the story of Dhul Qarnayn alayhi salam is in Surah Al-Kahf. I will not go into that today because I believe we'll expand the lecture ever so much if we go into the tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf and also the tafsir of Surah Al-Anbiya. But What the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu and others mentions is that the tartib, the order is that Khuruj al-Dajjal, first the appearance of al-Dajjal, then the descent of Isa alayhi salam and the killing of al-Dajjal. Then he said, ثُمَّ يَخْرُجُ يَعْجُوجُ وَمَعْجُوجُ, then Yajuj and Majuj will appear. Meaning the companions mention this order. And he says, فَيَمُوجُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, at that time they shall, فَيَمُوجُون, this is from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when the barrier shall be broken, they shall, Maja yamuju is like rolling of the waves. They shall go into the earth like the waves. Why? They will exceed humanity at that time, at that particular time. فَيُفْسِدُونَ فِيهَا, and they shall cause corruption in the earth. And this is the meaning of وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ, from every slope they shall descend. Now this is the tafsir of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu for the verse, that after the time of Isa alayhi salam, وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ, they shall descend down from every slope. Likewise, the location of Yajuj and Majuj. Where are they located? Meaning, where is the barrier located? Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma, what's narrated from him in Al-Tabari and Al-Qurtubi and others, he said, Huwa fi munqati'i biladi Turk. It's in the Turkish lands. Now, you know, if you read up on the Turkish lands were not only in modern day Turkey, it's all the Central Asian lands all the way up to China. Even occupied Kashmir under China, that would count as Turkic land. That's why the people are Turkic in that occupied part of Kashmir. So from Kashmir all the way up to modern day Turkey, these are Turkic lands. In fact, Kashmir was ruled by Turkic people prior to the Mughal dynasty. So, Mimma yali Armenia wa Azerbaijan, meaning what is next to Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is referring to the area in Georgia. If you check Tafsir Ruh al-Ma'ani of Ismail Haqqi, you'll find him making a mention of the Khazar Jews. He mentions it. But he says, if you take the position of Abdullah bin Abbas that the barrier was located there, then there is a possibility that it is the Khazar Jews. But then he refutes the position. And he says it is not authentically reported from Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. So it is reported from him, but whether it is authentic or not is questionable. Where did the idea come from that the Khazar Jews are in fact Yajuj and Majuj? You'll find this in early Christian sources. So people who accepted Islam, like Ka'ab al-Ahbar, they accepted Islam, but they were well versed in what we call the Bible today. They related many of the narrations of Yajuj and Majuj, which have their roots in Israelite reports. So many of the reports that we may read from Wahab bin Munabbih or Ka'ab al-Ahbar, when you read these reports, some of the strange reports, like their ears are so big that when they go to sleep, they wrap themselves in their own ears. Or some of them are an arm's length tall and arm's length wide. If you read these narrations, remember they are from Israelite reports. So even if the chain of narration is authentic, it doesn't mean it's from the Prophet ﷺ. It's from Ka'ab al-Ahbar and Wahab bin Munabbih. The idea that the Khazar Jews are the Yajuj and Majuj or from those tribes, this had its roots in early Christianity also. In fact, there is an academic work written on this. So this work, Gog and Magog, in early Eastern Christian and Islamic sources, Salam's quest for Alexander's wall. This work has been published by Brill, an academic work. In here he has the reference to Yajuj and Majuj in early Christian sources. But this book is an interesting book because the book mentions the journey of a man known as Salam. Salam at-Tarjuman. Salam the interpreter. He was commissioned by the Caliph Al-Wathiq Billah. So the Abbasi Caliph Al-Wathiq Billah commissioned this man to travel and find the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. Al-Wathiq Billah passed away in the year 847. Not Islamic year, Christian calendar. 847. So this is after the lifetime of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by over 200 years. Over 200 years after the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commissioned Salam at-Tarjuman to find the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. I will read the account out to you shortly before the video. So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam described and gave the physical description of Yajuj and Majuj. In one khutbah sermon, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Innakum taquluna la aduwa lakum." You say you have no enemy. This was after they conquered Makkah al-Mukarramah, and the companions thought they had no enemies. You say you have no enemy. وَإِنَّكُمْ لَا تَزَالُونَ تُقَاتِلُونَ عَدُوًا. You will never cease fighting enemies, meaning enemies of the Muslims. حَتَّى يَخْرُجَ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ. Until Yajuj and Majuj appear. عِرَاضُ الْوُجُوهِ. They will have broad faces. صِغَارُ الْعُيُونِ. Small eyes. صَحْبٌ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Small noses, and they will descend from every slope. كَأَنَّ وُجُوهَهُمْ الْمَجَانُ الْمُطْرَقَةِ. As if their faces are like flat shields or hammered shields, meaning the shape of their face. This is the description of the Mongol people, because there are authentic hadith mentioning the Mongolian invasion of Baghdad, even though Baghdad was not built at the time, it was built later. But this shows the miraculous aspect of the prophecy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam there was no masjid in Damascus, there was no Islam in Damascus, there was no minaret in Damascus, Islamic minarets. Yet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam foretold that Isa alayhi salam will descend at a minaret. Likewise, in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ foretold the invasion of Baghdad, but there was no city as Baghdad. This narration, when scholars would look at the hadith, they would say the chain of narration is weak. Then 200 years after Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr bin Ahmad, the author of Tariq Baghdad, 200 years after he compiled the hadith work, Baghdad was invaded. And scholars then said the hadith was authentic. Meaning, some people say the work of Nu'aym bin Hammad has numerous inauthentic hadith. But many of the things have come about, and many things will come about which authenticates the hadith. Nevertheless, the Mongol invasion is foretold in different hadith. So if someone says the Mongolians are the Yajuj and Majuj, which some scholars did think that, when the Mongolian invasions happened, because it shocked the Muslim world, they thought this is Yajuj and Majuj. Like some people are now reinterpreting Western civilization as being Yajuj and Majuj, when this is incorrect. Why do the Yajuj and Majuj look similar to the Mongolians? Because they are descendants of the same race. So this was a map that we will inshallah insert into the video later of Georgia and the barrier itself. Of course, further proof given for the Darial Gorge being the actual gorge is because of the Black Sea. So Dhul Qarnayn alayhi salam, when he traveled to the west, he came across a black body of water, beyond which the sun was setting on the horizon. Everyone knows the story from Al-Quranul Kareem. So people say the Black Sea is nearby, therefore it's that location. But the video that I will show you, there is another contender for that location also. Now, what is the hadith which relates to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sleeping in the night and he saw a dream regarding the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj? He said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Waylun lil Arab, woe to the Arabs, min sharrin qad iqtarab, from an evil which has approached. Futiha al-yawma min radmi Yajuj wa Majuj mithlu hadhihi." What was opened from the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj, similar to this. Meaning, the Prophet ﷺ did this. That there was a small hole made in the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. So Zainab radiallahu anha said, "O Messenger of Allah, afanahliku wa fina as-salihun, will we perish even if there are pious people from amongst us?" Qala na'am. He said, yes, إِذَا كَثُرَ الْخَبَثِ, if khabath, impurities increase, meaning an indication towards zina, adultery and fornication. So, this is the hadith that people cite to say that the barrier has been breached. Now, because the barrier has been breached, therefore they have been released. This is the hadith cited to prove that fact. But the hadith mentions that a small hole was made. It doesn't mention a breach. But some people say no, the hole was not this small. They cite different citations to say the hole was big enough for men to come out. And Al-Imam Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala, when commenting on Surah Al-Kahf, he mentions the Mongolians and he says maybe the Mongolians were the precursor to Yajuj and Majuj. So if someone tries reconciling between the two different opinions, they would say that the Mongolians are a precursor to Yajuj and Majuj, and then the Western nations are also a precursor to Yajuj and Majuj, and the last influx of Yajuj and Majuj will come in the time of Isa alayhi salam. This can make some sense, but again, it is not the mainstream opinion. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates, and this is a famous hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Inna Yajuj wa Majuj yahfirani kulla yawmin. They dig every day. They dig every day. Hatta idha kadu yarawna shu'a ash-shamsi. When they are about to see the light of the sun, what do? Qala alladhi alayhim irji'u. The person who is in charge says, return. So they go back. He says, فَسَنَحْفِرُ غَدًا, we shall dig it up tomorrow. When they go back, they come back and they find it back as it was, meaning sealed again completely. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills that they are released, the man who is in charge will say, Insha'Allah, with the will of might of Allah. This means that they recognize a divine creator. Someone may ask, why are Yajuj and Majuj thrown into hellfire if the message of Islam didn't reach them? Because the Quran says, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We do not punish a people until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dispatches a messenger. The response is that on the night of Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam conveyed the message of Islam to them. But someone may say the offspring, after hundreds of years, the message did not reach them. So why are they punished? The response is that the Maturidi position can be cited that according to Al-Imam Abu Hanifa and others, that if someone, the message of Islam does not reach them, they should at least recognize a divine creator. This hadith is proof for that the caretaker, the one who looks over their affairs, will say Insha'Allah, meaning he recognizes a divine God who will give divine permission for them to open the barrier. So when they come out, Then فَيَرْمُونَ بِسِهَامِهِمْ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, they will shoot the arrows to the skies. فَتَرْجِعُ عَلَيْهِمْ بِدَمْ, it shall come back to them with blood. Some people with their theories, they change every few hundred years. Decades ago, some of these people who ascribe to the theory that the Western nations are Yajuj and Majuj, they said the arrows are the rockets, that NASA launches rockets and the communist Russians launch rockets. And then their rockets come back down, meaning Apollo 13 and others that were destroyed. These were some of the interpretations people gave. But they changed their theory. One of them, first he said Yajuj is America and Majuj is Russia. Now he's pro-Russia. So he says I was wrong. Only the Western nations are Yajuj and Majuj. These are the different theories that change. So they say فَيَقُولُونَ قَهَرْنَا أَهْلَ الْأَرْضِ, we have overwhelmed the people of the earth. وَعَلَوْنَا أَهْلَ السَّمَاءِ, and we have conquered the denizens of the heavens also. This is a famous hadith. So this means every day the Yajuj and Majuj attempt to breach the barrier. Now, the famous hadith of An-Nawas ibn Sam'an radiyallahu anhu. An-Nawas ibn Sam'an radiyallahu anhu has a famous hadith which I cited in previous seminars, a long hadith, that after Isa alayhi salam descends, then kills Ad-Dajjal, he will go into Jabal al-Tur, Yajuj and Majuj will surround Jabal al-Tur and the surrounding areas, and the Muslims will be unable to descend until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a disease in their necks, like an epidemic, and they shall die. Then what will happen? The Muslims will burn their arrows, the arrow sticks, for 7 years. Meaning they will have so many arrows that they will burn them. This hadith is very clear that Yajuj and Majuj shall descend, shall appear after the descent of Isa alayhi salam. But of course, the people who follow the other methodology, they will say, in response to that, they will say, the verse of the Quran comes first, therefore anything that contradicts the Quran, we reject the hadith. But the answer is that the verse of the Quran does not support your claim. Meaning the verse, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ, does not support your claim. Because that verse is referring to the return of destroyed towns of the people back to Allah. That they cannot return until the signs of the Day of Judgment have occurred and the Day of Judgment occurs. This is what the verse refers to. It's a distortion of the verse of the Quran, that interpretation. Another narration also states that they shall ascend onto Jabal al-Khamar in Palestine. Now Jabal al-Khamar, it's called Khamar because it has numerous trees, and they shall drink all the water prior to ascending to the mountain of Jabal al-Khamar. So some people will say this has occurred now with the Israeli occupation. But we believe that this will occur in the end times after the descent of Isa alayhi salam. Again, there are numerous hadith. Some of them are repetitive, but I will not repeat some of them. We will go now to two final things before the questions and answer. One is the account of Salam at-Tarjuman that Al-Wathiq Billah dispatched. And the second will be the video where two contemporary people take an expedition to the area. So this Salam at-Tarjuman, he was a Jew, a Khazar Jew. So that's what makes it more interesting. A Khazar Jew is dispatched by the Muslim Khalifa to go and discover the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. Firstly, this account is found in numerous Arabic sources, and it did occur, but we will read one account. Salam, the interpreter, told me, meaning that the historian writes, when Al-Wathiq Billah saw in his dream that it was as if the barrier which the two-horned one, meaning Dhul Qarnayn, had built between us and Gog Magog had opened. He looked for a man whom he could send out to the place for the barrier in order to seek information about it. So then he mentions the entire story. It's a very interesting story. If anyone needs the photocopies of this page, because the book costs over £100, meaning it's an academic work. Less people read academic works, so the prices are high. So at the end, he finds the barrier and he returns back. He says, meaning over 30 men were dispatched with him. Half of them died on the way. And he mentions the various locations. And they found the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. We arrived at Surah Man Ra'a. I was admitted to Al-Wathiq, told him the story and showed him the iron which I had scraped from the gate. He praised God, ordered alms to be distributed, and gave every one of the men 1,000 dinars. We had reached the barrier in 16 months and had returned in 12 months and some days. So that was his account of the journey. He himself was a Khazar Jew, and meaning the Jews lived in peace and harmony with the Muslims in that time. Unfortunately, Zionism corrupted them into, meaning some of the occupying Jews. So Salam al-Tarjuman mentions the Khazar Jews also. Now why I cite this is because there are some people who are insistent that the Khazar Jews are Yajuj and Majuj, because they say the Muslims were unable to defeat them, which is untrue. They had numerous wars, but the Khazar Jews were defeated even by the Ukrainians, and eventually their empire was defeated and destroyed. They were dispersed. Many of them migrated to Europe. If they were Yajuj and Majuj, they would never have been destroyed until Isa alayhi salam arrives. So this theory contradicts facts. But Salam al-Tarjuman meets the Khazar Jews. So he writes, this is now the academic writing. In Al-Mas'udi's days, Sarir was only 2 parasangs, what we call farsang, away, about 6 miles, I think, away from the Khazar town of Samandar, which lay at an 8 days march from Derbent. Salam's information about this part of his journey in the Caucasus seems confirmed by Ibn Rusta. According to the latter, the journey from Sarir to the Khazars took 12 days through mountains and over meadows. The Khazars were one of 2 rival Turkish, by the way, Khazars are the current occupiers, Benjamin Netanyahu and all these are Khazars. They are Turkic. So 2 rival Turkish Khanates. The Khanates were the people who ruled Central Asia, which had emerged in Western Eurasia at the time of Salam. The other was that of the Bulgars. From their capital, Atil, on the lower Volga, the Khazars dominated the trade routes from the North Caucasian steppe lands to the middle Volga and from Kiev to Khwarezmia in modern Turkestan. Their hold over the North Caucasus, however, was disputed by the Arabs from 641 onwards. So because the Arabs are at war with them, these were the people released from the Darial Gorge. They were released from there and they kept the Arabs at bay. For over a century, a series of wars raged in the region. The possession of Derbent and one of the Khazar towns of Balanjar and Samandar, perhaps the winter and summer quarters of the ruling clan, was the major aim of both parties, meaning Arabs, Muslims and the Khazars. Since the Filan Shah gave Salam a letter for the king of the Khazars, some sort of contact must have existed between this Caucasian Avar and the Khazar ruler, whose territory extended to the east of the Caspian Sea, whither Salam was about to depart. By the time the Caliph's envoy arrived in Khazaria, peace reigned between the Arabs and the Khazar. So, according to this, the Yajuj and Majuj made peace with the Arabs, whose last major incursion into Arab holdings in the Trans-Caucasus had taken place in 799. Listen to this part, and this is especially for the people who ascribe to the other theory. The Khazars were allies of the Byzantines. They were allies of the Eastern Roman Empire. And until the 10th century, they remained the cornerstone of the Byzantine defense network against Eurasian nomads. So, additional to this, Islam, however, was prominent in the towns of the Khazar Empire. Islam was dominant. So, according to these accounts, if the Khazars were Yajuj and Majuj, Islam was prevalent in their towns. They even made peace with the Muslims at some time. And additional to that, they were a barrier for the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire, which according to some of our would-be eschatologists like Imran Hussein, who believes that Putin is the savior of the Muslim world, and or other theories he comes out with, and that the Muslims should return Hagia Sophia back to Eastern Orthodox Christians. According to him, the Khazars are Yajuj and Majuj. So according to him, the Khazar, Yajuj and Majuj, meaning this would have to be his conclusion. The Khazar, Yajuj and Majuj had an alliance with the Eastern Orthodox Christians. How do we respond to his claim that the Hagia Sophia should be returned? A simple response. Any city that is conquered by force by the Muslims, with no treaty, with warmongers, meaning the people are aggressive towards Islam, the Muslims conquer their cities. If the ruler decides to convert a church in that scenario into a masjid, he is permitted. But if it is open through peaceful means, then we are not permitted. What is the proof? Al-Jami' al-Umawi, the Grand Umayyad Masjid in Damascus, was previously a church. Who conquered Damascus? The Sahaba. When the Sahaba conquered it, they made Al-Jami' al-Umawi, because it was conquered by force, into a masjid. But when they peacefully conquered Jerusalem, they did not convert any of the churches. Big distinction. So Imran Hussein needs to answer this point. Now we will go on to the video, inshaAllah ta'ala. A video of where some travelers, one Egyptian and one Central Asian Muslim, they go to the location of the barrier which Salam had witnessed. So as we play the video, I will give you a running commentary, inshaAllah. This is Salam al-Tarjuman's map. So the map, Al-Wathiq Billah. This map, an old ancient map of the route that Salam al-Tarjuman took through various territories, including the Khazar Empire. As he mentioned, it took 16 months, and he took 30 men, and half of them died on the way, and they were reimbursed by the Khalifa Al-Wathiq Billah. He even gave blood money. Now he uses Google Maps to go to the same area. As he goes to using Google Maps, he locates a barrier in Kyrgyzstan, modern day Kyrgyzstan. So outwardly the barrier looks like a snow covering between two mountains. A snow covering between two mountains. So this is a modern map, and this is the ancient map. I have copies of this also. This is the ancient map that they took. Even though the researcher of this book doesn't mention Kyrgyzstan, because he believes that it was the Great Wall of China they observed and they came back. So this now is the barrier, a picture of the barrier on Google Maps. So people say, where is the barrier on Google Maps? So if you notice, these are two mountain passes, as the Quran describes, Bain al-Sadafain. Sadafain is the two tips of a mountain, and they are also described in the Quran as Saddain. So between the two, a barrier is made. So these are the individuals who leave. They go to Kyrgyzstan now, taking guides with them to go through the mountain range. So these mountains are some of the highest mountains in the world. And the people are horse, they use horse to scope the mountains still to this day, similar to the Mongols. And if you look at the flag of Kyrgyzstan, it has a sun. So Dhul Qarnayn alayhi salam journeyed out to find where the sun sets and where the sun rises. This is mentioned. There is an additional video to this with Genghis Khan's history and how and regarding the water, the Black Lake. There is a Black Lake in Kyrgyzstan as well with black water, which fits the description of the Quran. So now they pass through all these mountain passes. So uncharted territory. At this point, they rest for the night. So they camp out in the wilderness. At this point, he's just describing what food he's eating for the night. Of course, the original video is in Arabic. Otherwise, we would have played the sound. Now, the next morning, they depart from the campsite to the actual barrier. So one of them will board a plane with the army of Kyrgyzstan, and the other one will go by foot using donkeys and mules. So the terrain fits the stereotypical description of Yajuj and Majuj terrain, as well as the physical description of the Kyrgyzstani people or the people in that locality. Now they plan out the journey. This is the Egyptian researcher. He will be boarding a plane, and the native people will be going by mules. So they prepare for the journey, a bit similar to Salam al-Tarjuman, because he mentions they took with them mules and donkeys. So they needed mules and donkeys to research the terrain. So they ascend now using the mules or ponies. Now this is through the pass, the passing that we saw on the Google Maps. The side video is showing the Egyptian researcher boarding a plane with the army. So the army now will take him by plane, with the helicopter, to have a bird's eye view of the barrier. While the more interesting journey is the the men on the ponies because they will come across some interesting artifacts. He's planning the journey now with the army officers. And remember, what's interesting is that they've used Salam Tarjuman's map. And using a Salam Tarjuman's map, they found an actual barrier on Google Map. Using Google Map, they're actually flying and going by mules to the location. So it will be interesting for us now to see what they actually discover. So now they cannot even use mules. They must use backpacks. So they take the backpacks to ascend. As they march through, he finds man-made iron blocks. So this is one of the interesting finds. So iron blocks that were man-made, they will show those blocks that are lying around the region of the wall. So this is one block made from iron, but as you can see, that's man-made. That's done by men. That's not done by nature. As you notice, the mountains are clear of any snow. But when they reach the barrier, there will be snow covering the barrier. This is because iron is cold and the ice remains on the barrier throughout the year because of the cold iron. So initially when you will see the barrier, you will think this is just snow. But then what they will do is get ice picks and break through the ice and then use metal detectors to show that it's an actual iron barrier. So as they fly now, this flat ice that you observe is an actual barrier. What it covers is between two mountain tops, and what's behind that, as they believe, is Yajuj and Majuj, the tribe. This would mean that the backside of the mountain is covering Yajuj and Majuj like a roof. So like a huge cave or a huge tunnel that goes underground. So that would mean the two sides of the mountain cover them, and also the top of the mountain. And the Yajuj and Majuj were a mountain civilization that was embedded inside of the mountain, and this barrier is covering them. This is if we follow this claim. I'll give my conclusion at the end. So this is now the back part of the mountain. So there's no way that someone can penetrate the inside of the mountain because all parts are covered. So that's the backside. But then the man-made area is the front. They claim that the front is the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj, when this side where the snow is showing, and they're saying that the snow and the ice remains throughout the year because the barrier is cold. So therefore the snow is retained. So this part they would claim is the barrier. So these are the stones he shows again, the iron man-made stones. As you can see, blocks. These are actual blocks of iron that are man-made. So these are, if the claim is true, then these are the remnants of some kind of dynamites that blew or some tools that were used to make iron blocks. They have a Sheikh Sha'rawi playing in the original video, reciting some tafsir, mentioning some commentary on the Suratul Kahf. Of course, Sheikh Sha'rawi never ascribed to this position. This is a more recent discovery. If we dismiss the discovery of As-Salam Tarjuman. So they would claim that is the barrier, and the two ends are the Sadafain, and the rest of the mountain is covered. So if you remove the barrier, there is an entrance into the mountain. So this would mean an underground civilization or a mountain civilization. That is a better view, as you can see. It would take more independent scholars to travel out to Kyrgyzstan and verify this slope with more meticulous methods. If any of you are hikers and fit enough to go, then we can arrange some kind of journey to Kyrgyzstan. I'm sure the mountains of Yorkshire help in reaching some type of fitness. So now what they will do is they will go down the slope, cut away some of the ice, and then check for the metal. So this is a top view of the mountain and of the claimed barrier. They are claiming if you remove the ice, underneath is a barrier made from iron blocks. This is the claim. So he has descended and now he cuts out some of the ice and then uses a metal detector. Here in writing they claim that view is the two mountains on either side, which were from where Yajuj and Majuj would appear, and this barrier blocks them from coming out. Now he utilizes the metal detector. So in the original video, you would hear the bleeping of the metal detector. It shows positive for metal. So there is metal behind the ice. They claim this is the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. So wherever he moves the metal detector, there is a bleeping sound. And this is to show, they throw an object down to show that the smooth surface is because it's a flat wall, not a natural wall. And this is a final view of what they claim is the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. Of course, this will be disputed by people present. I am not claiming this is conclusive. I just found this to be an interesting piece of research. The fact that they went out their way to research it, we should commend them for that. Okay, this is showing the minaret in Damascus from where Isa alayhi salam shall descend. This is the minaret. How do we conclude this subject of Yajuj and Majuj? How I would conclude the subject is anything that I've mentioned is not mustahil aqlan, is not rationally impossible that a group of people or civilization be contained within a barrier, behind a barrier which is covered by mountains, as well as the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hide them wherever He wills, and this can defy Google Maps and satellites, and when they appear they will be huge in comparison to the small number of Muslims that will exist on the face of the earth. But do we conclude that this is the barrier, or the Darial Gorge is the barrier? How do we conclude that? Meaning, that what is the conclusion? The answer is that when the sign will occur, no doubt remains in the mind of a Muslim. So if the sign has occurred, there will be no doubt. But it is clear for all that the sign has not occurred because Isa alayhi salam has not descended, as well as the remaining doubts that are established. So that is how I will conclude the subject of Yajuj and Majuj. Firstly, through Al-Quranul Kareem. Our first source of protection is Al-Quranul Kareem. Every Friday recite the entire Suratul Kahf, chapter number 18 of Al-Quranul Kareem. If you are unable to recite Suratul Kahf, then recite the first 10 verses and the last 10 verses. If you are unable to recite the last 10 verses, then just recite the first 10 verses of Suratul Kahf. Additional to this, have a wird, a litany that you recite from Al-Quran Al-Kareem every day, like Suratul Yasin, Suratul Mulk, Suratul Waqi'ah. So attaching ourselves to Al-Quran Al-Kareem, increasing our memorization of Al-Quran Al-Kareem. Secondly is knowledge. Increasing our knowledge of Quran and Sunnah. Meaning, not to be like the ignorant followers of the shuyukh who talk about the end of times and they have no knowledge themselves, they rely solely on the shaykh. Read up on subjects like I mentioned, reading of Al-Isha'a li-Ashrat al-Sa'a of Barzanji. This is essential reading. Or Al-Usasu wal-Muntaliqat of Shaykh Abu Bakr al-Mashhur. These are essential readings. Books like Iqdud Durar fi Akhbar al-Muntazar. Increasing our knowledge of Quran and Sunnah, mean Al-Quran Al-Kareem and the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thirdly, increasing our ibadah, because the hadith states regarding times of fitan, tribulation, that when tribulation occurs, al-ibadah, acts of worship in the time of tribulation, is like migrating to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So increasing our worship, meaning praying 5 times a day, attempting to pray our salawat, our prayers in the masjid, especially the Fajr prayer. And then increasing our nawafil, like tahajjud, qiyamul layl, awwabin. When the sunrise happens, praying salah, which is known as salatul duha. Awwabin is after maghrib prayer, increasing our worship and avoiding sins. The fourth is investing your wealth, your cash, in gold and land. 2 things. If you have savings, you should be buying gold and land. 2 things. You will thank me for this advice in years to come. Rather than saving cash, except for the cash that you need at the moment, if you have large amounts of cash, buy gold with that cash and land. These are 2 good investments. For instance, in Wales, you can buy 2 acres of land for £40,000. 2 acres of land in Wales is better than having £40,000 in the bank, because you can utilize that as a farm. You can utilize that as a place to build a house. Land will always increase in price and never decrease. Remember, most wars are for land, then they are for water and gold. So, and buy blocks of gold. But in this country, you are taxed for gold. So how you bypass that is buy the gold sovereigns as collector's items. They are still solid gold, but you will bypass the tax laws. So invest in gold and land. Of course, many of you becoming happy that I'm giving material advice. Take the spiritual advice also. The 5th is a water source. Always be near a water source, that if the water is cut off, you are near a water source. In Yorkshire, you will not have that problem. Yes, you will have wells, but identify those wells, identify the rivers, identify a watering source, sanitation. Do not follow the way of people in India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, where the people have no common sense of sanitizing water. So many people excrete in water and then they suffer from cholera in those countries. And then you have a mosquito problem because they have no sewage system. And then mosquitoes spread diseases like malaria, and people die from those things because of lack of sanitization. This is something the Khan government should be working on first. Sanitizing water. If you want a Medina society, fix the watering system and the sewage system. If you want a Medina society, replace the paper money with gold and silver. If you want a Medina society, finish taxes and collect zakat. Finish taxes and collect jizya. Finish taxes and collect kharaj. Finish taxes and collect ushar. Finish taxes and reintroduce the Islamic economic system. This is the only way of reestablishing the Medina system. So water, make sure you have a watering source. It's good to invest in those water containers that clean out the water also. There are watering systems you can get that they clean out the tap water from all its chemicals. So that is a good thing to invest in. Number 6, have a log burner. Someone may think this is something small. No, you can buy devices to burn logs in, and if you have enough money, change the system in your house now, where with the log burner, you can warm your own water and you can warm your own house. Like that, you will not rely on the gas and electric. You will not rely on gas and electric companies. So If you have a log burner by which you can burn wood, maybe you can only use it in emergencies. Likewise, the solar panels. Place solar panels in your house, but have a log burner by which you can warm water, you can cook food, and you can warm the house, and you can do different things with the log burner alone. I'm sure there's many people are more intelligent than me in these regards. I mean, you can ask and inquire how to do this, how to place this system in the house where the log burner warms all the water and all the rooms around the house. Point number 7, go back to farming and raising animals. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ mentions that a man who runs away from tribulations, raising goats and sheep and cattle and animals, he praises that person who goes away in the wilderness to raise animals. Go back to raising animals and farming. For people from Kashmir, they can go back to farming and also have the reward of ribat. Ribat is standing in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to defend your land, because the Indian army is on the border. So if you have land in Kashmir, open farms in Kashmir, you won't fall into the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ foretold in the end of times there will be people who will farm but they will abandon jihad. A group of people who will farm but abandon jihad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall subjugate them with an enemy. But no, if you are in Kashmir or Palestine, you farm the land, but you are also murabitun, you are also defending your land according to the law of that country and international law also. So going back to farming and grazing animals. But if you cannot go to Kashmir or other places, then buy land in Wales, buy land in Yorkshire. And meaning a few of you, if you come together, you can invest in land in the UK also. This brings me to my final point, which people always mention. Do we have to migrate? I say no. Why? Because the entire world has become a global culture. Whatever bad effects you are running away from here, you will find sometimes worse things in Muslim countries. Yes, anyone who has experience of Muslim countries will know. So rather than running away from the UK, invest in the UK, buy gold and land here in the UK and start farms, Muslim farms in the UK. Some people say we should leave the UK, but look at the infrastructure in the Muslim world that the Muslim rulers will give you more hassle in terms of your farming and different things than the UK government will. So you do not need to migrate. You can start investing as groups. So for instance, in Halifax, you have a group of Muslims that invest in a farm. Then everyone can go to that farm and buy their local produce. You can have 20 people investing in a farm. If someone says it costs too much, then if you get 50 people investing £1,000 for a non-profit farm, and then you allocate one person to run the farm who will get a wage from the farm, and the rest of you can go and buy your dairy and products and your milk and different things, natural things, keeping the farm running, then local community can keep the farm running. Why is this important? If there is an economic crash tomorrow, your paper money or money is worthless, but your farm will be worth something. Your animals will be worth something. Your gold will be worth something. So these are the best guidelines. I gave thought to this that I can give for people on the Akhirul Zaman, not to despair. You carry on with life. You carry on with life, but if you carry, how many guidelines? 9? But there are 9 guidelines. If you follow these 9 guidelines, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you. Of course, there's dua as well. Many du'as you can do. Go through Al-Adhkar of Al-Imam al-Nawawi, you'll find different dua that people can recite to protect themselves from tribulation. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our efforts and strengthen us in the end of times. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us strong iman. First and most important, strong iman. Secondly, that He strengthens us in our ibadah, our worship. Thirdly, He gives us mental, spiritual and physical health and well-being. Fourthly, that our material well-being is good, that He safeguards our worldly wealth and our spiritual wealth. And I've given you guidelines to do that. Invest in land and invest in gold. Safeguard your wealth. An additional thing I would say is look after your health also. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. This was a very successful event. It's been this is the fourth event, alhamdulillah, completely packed out, and so many of you sat toward the end. This shows your eagerness to learn, and so many people online. This shows that there is a need for this subject. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He accepts this and makes it solely for His sake. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.